Alright, we are now going to pull the Magneto, the stator cover off. We're going to pull the rear drive shaft joint off, recoil cup. We'll start by pulling that drive shaft here. And what you do on this one is grab two flat screwdrivers. This shaft will just pull out of there. There'll be a boot protecting it. We just cut that boot off of there. Then you just take these two screwdrivers. You want to get those splines lined up. So you want to make sure they're centered. Pull it out somewhat centered, and then get your screwdrivers in behind there. And sometimes they'll just slide right out. Sometimes they're a little more difficult, but we'll just kind of walk it out there, and they'll just pull right up and come right out. So that is the drive joint assembly on that. Now we'll pull this Magneto cover here. There'll be quite a few gears behind this one, so we've got a lot of 8mm bolts. Put a bolt back in there. We've got a 14mm nut here that we'll remove. And make sure this doesn't turn, so you're not turning that cam chain and breaking a case there. Sometimes that cup will just slide right out. Sometimes you gotta do the same thing as that shaft, just kind of walk it off of there. There's your pull starter cup then. Now this cover is ready to come off, and there'll be a bit of a magnetic pull just because of the stator and the Magneto. Use your fingers to kind of walk it off. There's your stator there, and then all the gears stayed here. There's a shift linkage here, your starter gear here, then here's your flywheel. Behind your flywheel is the starter gear. This gasket here is pretty brittle, so we'll pull some of that out of there so we don't have a bunch of scraps in the bottom end. We'll get ready to pull this flywheel here. Again, make sure it doesn't spin when you take this off. Now on this one, we've got a cap that'll go over top of these threads so we don't damage these threads. If we run that puller down to pull this flywheel off, it could damage this crank, and that crank is good. So we run that down until it stops. We want to make sure it's not touching the flywheel. Now we got to find the right puller here. Thread that all the way on until it stops, and pull the flywheel off. A lot of times if you put pressure on it and then tap it once, just at the end there, a lot of times it'll break free. Pull that off. Pull this cap off of there. So you want to make sure when you're pulling flywheel in here, you want to, on this King Quad, the King Quad 450 uses the same puller, King Quad 750, 700. You want to make sure it has this cap. 400 also, because you do not want to damage that crank, and it will damage it if you run that puller down onto that small of an end. So we've got a keeper here. Here's a starter idler gear. Here's your other idle gear here. That sits right on the flywheel there. We've got your cam chain. So now I've got all those parts out of here. And we'll pull this yoke up front here, this drive shaft. We'll want to get that pulled here quick, as well as these gears. So I'm going to go ahead and do this drive shaft here. And what you'll do is find the clips that are attached to the yoke, attached to the motor. So we're going to go for these clips here, this side and this side, on the yoke that's attached to the motor. So what we're going to do is take a screwdriver, and we're find the end of that clip and just kind of tap it up to pull that clip. Now once that clip starts moving, and make sure you don't go too far, it'll go zinging across the room. And then take and pry on the back of it, and it'll spit that keeper right out. Now you'll flip it over to the other side of the yoke that's attached to the motor. Same thing. Tap it until there's room enough to get your screwdriver in behind there. Now what you're going to do is tap down on the two caps that you just pulled the keepers from. Starts that cap, now same thing. We're getting close to those being off. Cap is off, we'll flip it over. Do the same thing on this side. Now it's incredibly easy to put it back together. And that's not wanting to come very well, but I think what happened is that probably a pin or a roller fell out of there, and it's keeping us from really getting good contact on that cap. There you go, it came out there, and the pins did, or the rollers did come out of there, so we want to make sure before going back together we stick all those back up, re-grease it all. Now these joints are cheap enough just to replace if there's any kind of damage at all or they look like they've gotten hot. This one looks good, but you might be better off just replacing it at this point rather than try to find all the rollers or re-grease it and put it back together. So while you're there, sometimes it's easier just to replace those. For $15 you can get a good U-joint, and then you don't have to mess with these. But anyway, a couple of them fell out. Once they fall out, they get dirty. We'll keep all that together. But now this joint is ready to come apart here, and that is the yoke. That's the front yoke off of that motor. So we'll go ahead and finish pulling this other yoke here. Make sure it doesn't spin that motor. Alright, and that yoke is off. Okay, we'll go ahead and pull these gears and set them off to the side here. We've got a couple shift forks. Spring-loaded linkage here. And there'll be a couple places we'll need snap ring pliers for this gear and this gear. Finish pulling that apart. And then we'll go ahead and I think we'll be ready to split this case here. Pull that starter too before we split that case. These you won't be able to split that case until you pull those gears off of there. Otherwise those gears and that shaft would stay in this side and it just makes it more difficult. So okay, we'll pull more 8mm. We'll also pull there's a couple cable mounts that go here. Gear position sensor down here. Takes 2 Phillips screws to remove that. The starter's already ready to come off. We've already taken those 2 Phillips screws out. That's sealed by an O-ring on this side of the case, and sometimes that O-ring will really bind in there. We'll go ahead and pull this mount off and then we'll be able to get to the starter easier. Okay, starter's off, make sure it turns freely, hook it up to power, make sure that works properly. Gear position sensor. Move this sensor as well. Okay, there's that sensor there. Be careful not to break this sensor here. It's plastic housing, and when you pry on it, sometimes it can break. So we'll go ahead and start removing case bolts. We'll remove this as well, and you'll see why once we have that case split. But it has got a ball and a spring that keeps a shift mechanism together, and it just makes it a little more challenging to remove it if that's in there. So there'll be a ball or a rounded cap in the bottom here that'll sit into a shift drum in there. So I think we've got 8mm bolts on either side, but we'll start with this side here and remove these. See if we can find them all. Ways down in there, an impact socket isn't going to work. One down there right beside the cylinder bolt, so don't miss that one. Then one right here by the idler gear. And that might be it for this side. We'll flip it over and pull those on that side. We've got another 12mm right here, and that might be it for this set. I'm going to pull this linkage here so we don't lose that. I like to find a good spot where I can try to keep all the gears one side or the other. That way everything kind of stays together. So I try to just kind of walk it out like that. That'll keep everything in one place. So there's one side of the case, and there's the other. And this side, all the gears were able to stay on this side. So here's your main rear drive shaft assembly. That's a common problem for these because there's so much torque on this. Here's your front output shaft here with your transfer gear down there. I'm able just to pull that gear out. They've got a nut you can pull off there to pull this gear if you're going to leave this shaft, but there's no reason to leave that one. Same way with this one. You can pull that gear, leave this shaft, but in this case there's no reason to leave it. That'd be if you're replacing that gear. Then your crankshaft. You've got your shift drum here. You've got all your gears here. You got a shift mechanism here. All your shift forks right in this area, and one shift fork here. So that's the transmission on the King Quad 300.